I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education on Friday, June 5th, 2020. It's 7:04 p.m. We are excited to be here tonight for the purpose of having public interviews of our final candidates for the business administrator positions for the Salt Lake City School District. So welcome, and welcome to those who are watching on Facebook Live. We have a good group of people here today, and I'm excited to introduce them to you. But before we do that, I'd like to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you for doing that with me. I'd like to welcome to representatives of the Salt Lake City School District 6 Association groups. We are pleased to have you join us for this public interview for the School District Business Administrator. I'd like to take just a minute to introduce them. First, we have Eric Adams, who's the Building and Grounds President.
Good evening, everyone.
And B. Alonzo, the Child Nutrition President.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And Deborah Candler, who's here representing SLASA.
Hello, good evening.
And Cindy Mills, who's here to represent SLEOPA. Hi, Cindy. Ben Rowley, who represents transportation, is at Zions National Park. So he's got something better to do tonight, and we're jealous of him, right? And then I'd also like to introduce James Tobler, who's our SIA president.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you for being here and for engaging in this important process. We are really grateful for all that you do in representing our employees that serve our students and families. Now I'd like to take a quick minute and introduce, for those watching on Facebook perhaps, the school board members. We have Michelle Tuitupo representing Precinct 1, Michael Namelka representing Precinct 2, Catherine Kennedy representing Precinct 3, Vice President Salazar representing Precinct 4, Samuel Hansen representing Precinct 5. I'm Melissa Ford representing Precinct 6, and Christy Sweat representing Precinct 7. And we're here, as you know, for the purpose of interviewing our final candidates for the business administrator position. We've got 9 questions that we're planning to ask of each candidate. They've each received a list of those questions, and the questions were provided by the board and also by the association groups. And we've got 45 minutes. So by my math, which is never a good thing to trust, about 5 minutes, 5 minutes for each question. Does that sound fair? All right, thank you, everyone. I'd like to start by introducing our first interview for tonight. And I'm going to let him say hello so that we can see him on the screen. His name is Alan Kersley.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you for being here, Alan.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Alan graduated from the University of Utah with a Bachelor of Arts in Accounting with a Spanish minor. He followed up at the U the next year with a Master of Professional Accountancy. Alan began his career with the Utah State Auditor's Office. Alan holds an active CPA license. From 2006 to now, Alan has worked as the Salt Lake City School District as the Director of Finance. In the letter of introduction, in his application for this position, Alan stated, "I have a good understanding of the culture of the Salt Lake City School District. I understand the district's shared governance model and how it works with resources allocated to schools. I believe you will find my skills and experience to be an excellent fit for this position." In his letters of recommendation, 2 comments describe Alan as having a pleasant way of interacting with others and as someone who speaks his mind clearly and directly, often giving voice to what others may have felt but lacked the freedom or courage to say. I'm really excited and interested to hear the interview of Alan Kersley. What we'd like to do is start with question number 1. That's you, B.
Yeah. What do you see as your greatest strengths as a business administrator, or what do you see as your greatest need for improvement?
So first, greatest strength, specifically for the Salt Lake City School District Business Administrator position, as was said by President Ford, I have been with the school district. I actually started with the school district in 1998 and became the finance director in 2006. So I have 20 years of experience with the Salt Lake City School District. I understand its culture, its policies, practices. I've worked with all of our principals and many of our other administrators throughout the district. I know them. They trust me. And I do have a good understanding of how we go about doing business and what works and maybe what doesn't. As far as weakness, so along the strengths, we said, I'm a numbers person. I'm a CPA. I'm an accountant. I've been doing numbers forever. Part of what would be new for me in the position of business administrator is the political aspect of that job. I went into accounting because I love numbers. They are what they are. A 2 is always a 2 is always a 2, unless it's that accounting joke, whatever you want it to be. But in reality, a 2 is a 2. But the politics involved, that's what I need to get more practice at. That would be the one thing that I haven't had a lot of involvement in, that I would need to work on and learn those skills to maneuver through the politics of being the business administrator of the school district, like the Salt Lake City School District.
Hi, Alan. I have your question number 2. It is, what role does the business administrator play in Salt Lake City School District? How does this role support the development and implementation of district student achievement goals?
So the business administrator is the custodian of the district funds. The business administrator should create an environment of internal controls to make sure that those funds are safely kept, are spent how they should be spent appropriately, and safeguarded. The business administrator also provides financial guidance to the board, to the superintendent, and to other administrators. The business administrator should be there for them to answer their questions, financial related questions, to provide financial reports, to do calculations as far as, if we make decisions, how does that look? What does that cost? What are the resources to be allocated? As the business administrator in charge of budget allocations, those allocations should align with the school district student achievement plan. Every allocation should fit within one of those goal categories. If it doesn't, then the question is, why are we allocating resources to that? So as the business administrator, it would also be very important to review all of those budget allocations and make sure that, yes, they truly do fit within one of the goal categories of the district student achievement plan. And then oftentimes goals do change over time. As those goals change, then the allocations to the budget should also be reviewed to make sure that they are still pertinent to the ever-changing goals of the district, and so that we can make sure that we are using our limited resources to the best of our ability to affect the education of our students.
All right, Alan, I have number 3. Tell us about an experience you've had in managing budget cuts, and how did you develop the recommendations for cuts?
So as finance director, and before that senior accountant, I've never had the responsibility to truly, manage budget cuts district-wide. But back in the early 2000s, when we had the recession, for the finance department, each department was asked to look at your processes and figure out where can we cut. In the payroll department, it was determined. So I did calculations on, we're mailing out this many payroll checks every pay period. What does that cost in printing costs? What does that cost in mailing costs? And I came up with a annual cost of that of about $20,000. So I proposed that, if everyone was on electronic deposit, then that would save those resources to be used to help cover the budget costs. So as all of you know, we now are everybody is on direct deposit for their payroll checks. So that was a little part of what I did for that piece. But I do believe as a business administrator, and when it comes time to, if there's time to make or recommend budget cuts, it's not a one-person decision. It's very important to get all affected parties involved. I think there's probably different levels of what you're going to do. There's what's called the low-lying fruit. That example of the mandatory direct deposit, that was a low-lying fruit. It was something we could easily implement, and it saved us money and didn't affect the classroom. It didn't affect people's budgets. But as those budget cuts may loom large, it's important to use our shared governance to discuss with committees, with schools, with the committees that are at the different schools, with the board and superintendent, to come up with plans. The business administrator can put dollars and calculations to those plans, but it shouldn't be a one-person mandate of, we're going to cut this and we're going to cut that. All parties should be involved, and they should have their voice heard when those kind of decisions are being made. I think the key as you're doing that is important to what we're here for, and the main purpose we're here for is educating kids. So when you're having to prioritize budget cuts, you want to affect the classroom the least amount as possible. So as you're going through your hierarchy of potential budget cuts, to me, that's one of the driving factors that should be taken into account.
Right. Alan, I have question 4 for you. What methods do you use to ensure transparency in budget reports, specifically reporting financial information to principals, directors, the superintendent, the school board, and the community at large?
Starting, I think, to make sure your reports are transparent is the transactions that you're doing, the financial transactions, need to be recorded correctly. We have guidance on, we have funds, we have programs, we have object codes, functions. It's important that transactions get coded correctly so that when you run reports, there's a standard. You've set a standard, and your reports are generated against that standard. So that if I run a report this year, and if I run a report from previous years, you have a consistency amongst the transactions. So the report really is telling you what you think it's telling you. I think it's also important as you're generating reports to know who your audience is, and to have reports. A report of every transaction we have wouldn't be very useful because we have tens of thousands of transactions in every given year, and that information doesn't help. So you need to be able to summarize the data in a way that the intended audience would understand. A school principal, they're mostly concerned about their budget. So it's important that the reports that they can run or that they're given just include the pertinent information for them. Now, it's also important that those reports are as easy to understand as possible, but as a business administrator, I would say, come talk to me. Let's go through these reports. Let's make sure that you fully understand them so that you know what you're looking at. Maybe you don't know what an object code means. Well, let's talk about it. Why are they there? What does it mean? And how do I use that to better run my school? So that's part of it. What I feel is important, that people should feel free to come talk to me about their financial reports. And so I can explain it to them. I can help them understand what it means. And so then they can make decisions, because that's what financial reports are, is, you know, what have we been doing? What's our budget, and how do we go forward?
Thank you, Alan. And the next question is from Cindy Mills. I'm going to turn your microphone on, Cindy, and ask the question. Thank you.
I'm sorry, earlier I did say hello to myself. I didn't realize I was on mute. I'm sorry. What steps will you take to ensure equity among all employee groups in salaries and benefits as the salary budgets are prepared for contract negotiations?
So again, in my position as finance director, I've never been in a position to really, I mean, I'm not making the decisions of what the negotiations are. But where I have been in play is, you know, making calculations. If a particular bargain unit wants this for their salary or this on their benefits, what does that look like? How much does it cost? And as you know, each year we get an allocation from the state. Hopefully there's an increase in the WPU. So it's important to generate, to calculate how much money that generates for the school district. Now we know how much money we have to put on the table for negotiations. And it's very important that, you know, all of our bargaining units get an equal share based on, you know, their number of people. So, you know, in the past we've had cost of living increases. It needs to be very transparent that each of the groups is getting the same value for the dollar. They may choose to apply more money to the salary schedule or apply more money to insurance, but it does need to be very evident and shown to everyone involved that it's the dollar amount or the percentage value to each bargaining unit is equal, is the same, that not one is getting treated better than the other. I think it's also important just to know, so, you know, the salary schedules as far as what salary people get, market adjustments and so forth, you know, that's largely a product of human resources. So I would work with human resources as they're evaluating, you know, markets for salary schedules, just be there as an aid for them as they make those determinations of are we meeting the market.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hey, Alan, I have question 6. Given the large percentage of the Salt Lake City School District budget that is earmarked for wages and salaries, how would you work with the district's unions in the role of business administrator to ensure transparency in negotiations, that employees feel valued, and that the district is able to recruit and retain the best employees possible?
So a big component of this is communication and trust. So especially as a new business administrator, I would spend a lot of time with our bargaining units to build that trust. I mean, I've worked a little bit with them, but I would want them to trust me that when I present numbers, when I present figures, calculations, that trust is there, that they know, hey, what I'm saying is true. And I can run through the calculations with whomever just to show, hey, here's how we came up with these numbers. So building that trust would be very important in this process. It's also important that, you know, we do have limited resources. As a school district, we can't go, as to use an accounting term, we can't go build more widgets to generate more funds. So we're always, you know, trying to balance between how much resources we have and our demand on our resources. So it would be important to talk with the different groups, say, you know, if there isn't money available for salaries or, you know, an increase of salaries to the level that is desired, what other programs could be put in place to help our employees feel valued? I'm not in the classroom, I'm not a teacher, so it's important to talk to those who are, to get an understanding of, you know, how do they feel? What are their struggles? What are their trials? And then hopefully come up with some programs or some ideas that will help address some issues to make them feel more valued. Again, it's important have a continual dialogue between both sides, so that when the time comes to make those calculations, not everything's fresh and new, but we've been talking about ideas and plans for the whole year. I think it's also very important to work closely with human resources to say, okay, what are our recruiting practices right now? What are we doing? How is our retention of employees? Is it going well? If it's not, why are people leaving? And find out where those holes are in the program, and come up with ways to increase teacher retention, to increase job satisfaction across the board. And because it's not always about salary. Largely it is, but that's not always the case. So what are the things we can do to make people happy with their job, and to make them feel valued, not just by their students, but by the district as well? I would also work with the parties. It's important that we do have competitive salary schedules. If we don't, then people will leave for other districts to get higher pay. So it's important to always look at our schedules and make sure they are competitive with the market, so we can attract those good teachers to come work for us.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, James.
Eric, you're up with the next question.
Okay, this one's not on the list. Is that okay?
I think as long as we ask it of both candidates.
Okay,
It's not the one you sent me earlier?
it is the one I sent you.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Alan.
Hi, Eric.
Our executive board member, John Summers, came up with this question. And the question is, schools are established for learning. Do you believe that the district employees should be able to continue learning and improving their skills? And how would you fund that?
All right, so I see this as kind of two parts of learning. Number one, employees of the school district should always be have opportunities to keep their skills up to date of whatever their job is, and those trainings should be made available within the budget of the department. Whether it's keeping required licenses up to date, professional education services to make sure that we are keeping up to date on all the practices and policies of whatever our job entails. Then there's the learning, because I want to be able to get, I want to be able to progress and get another job. So I do believe there is some responsibility on individuals. They should always want to be lifelong learners. And if I want to qualify for a job that has higher education standards, I can on my own go and work on that and get that. And my reward will then be I'm now qualified for those higher jobs. There may come times when maybe the district's having a hard time filling positions. So we do need to create some sort of educational program. And back to Cindy's question, it's important that all of our bargaining units have the same opportunities, get the same in this case educational opportunities. So some of that also would be brought about through a negotiations process, because the question is, well, how would you pay for that? Well, through negotiations, as we talked about, each group, gets the same amount, and each group should be able to decide, okay, we want to do maybe some different stuff with our piece of the pie, shall we say. And if that's important to the group as a whole, then, we make calculations, we figure out how much that would cost and how to make it happen. So as far as employee and education, continuing education, there's a lot of parameters around that. I do think we should never be stagnant in our knowledge. We should always be working to improve ourselves, both for our current job and for our future selves.
Thank you.
Hi, Alan. I have your 8th question, which is, can you tell us of an experience when you have disagreed with the direction from a supervisor or a governing body? How did you communicate your disagreement, and what was the outcome?
So I've been lucky to have a very good relationship with my supervisor. We get along quite well, but that does not mean we always agree on everything. There are times when I don't have a specific example because often we have a disagreement, we resolve it, we move on, put that behind us, move on to the next thing. But when we do have a disagreement, maybe it's about how a particular transaction should be coded or how a report should be displayed. It's been important that I am able to voice my opinion, to feel validated in my opinion that there's some reasons behind it, and have a back and forth with my supervisor. Say, well, here's why I think we should present this data this way, and my supervisor can say, well, I think we should present it a different way, and here's why, so that both sides can be heard and feel they've been heard. And often we can come up with a mutual agreed decision. Sometimes we can't, and that's okay. At the end of the day, the supervisor is the supervisor. So, as a subordinate, you accept that decision, you implement it the best you can, you follow through, you support it, you just get 100% behind it. That's not to say if there's anything that would bring your integrity in question, which luckily I can say I've never had that brought up. But if someone were to tell me to do something that would question my integrity, I don't think my integrity should be compromised for anything. So there is a time to hold ground and stand fast, but for the most part, and it's been my experience always, we can come up with a decision, an agreement, and move forward with that decision.
Thank you.
Hi, Alan. I have question number 9, which is the last question. You'll be glad to know. It does have 3 parts, however, so it is a long question. How do you define the difference between equality and equity? How can Salt Lake City School District, through the business administrator, strategically allocate federal funding to qualifying schools to meet and support student needs necessary to close the achievement gap and racial disparities that exist within our district? If the board wanted to allocate resources to promote equity above equal distribution of resources, how might we sustainably move in that direction in the midst of a budget crisis?
All right, so first, the definition of equal. Equal means everybody gets the same. This student gets $100, that student gets $100, every student gets $100, and go forward, do the best you can. Equity comes with the understanding that not everybody starts at the same place. When we get kids into our educational system, some of them maybe had 2-3 years of preschool from the best preschool teachers in the world, and this might be their first educational experience. So they are actually going to need different allocation of resources to help level the playing field. We want all of our children in our educational system to have an equal opportunity to succeed. Maybe many of you have seen that cartoon that kind of explains the difference between equality and equity, where you have 3 boys that are trying to watch a baseball game over the fence. The first slide about equality has them all on the exact same size box to look over the fence. Unfortunately, not all the kids are the same height. So the shorter kid can't even see over the fence, but they're all got the same size box. Then the next slide shows what equity means, and that means each kid in that slide is getting the box size that that child needs in order to be able to look over the fence and see the baseball game. So that's how I see it in education is, each child has different needs. They come to us with a different background, and we need to allocate the resources to help each of them have their full potential to succeed. As a business administrator, I think it's first important to understand how are we currently allocating those resources. I mean, we have our Title I funds, our Title III funds, our at-risk funds. How are they being allocated to the schools? I think everyone should have a good understanding of that. And then we look at the effectiveness of how the resources are being used. Working with the assessment department, with the principals, we can say, are there holes somewhere? Where is this equity lacking? And then it can help us determine, is the issue a lack of funds, or do we need additional funds to address the gaps in equity? A lot of our federal funds comes with federal requirements. It says this is how you will allocate it. But I think it's important to review those allocations and see how effective they are through data, through the resources we have, so we can identify where those gaps are. And going forward, if it is determined that, you know what, we do need additional resources to help close some of these gaps, that's when you look at those budget priorities. You know, we talked about in one of the earlier questions of, is this allocation really addressing the district goals? If it's not, well, then maybe we can reallocate those resources to better address those goals. And obviously equity is one of our large overreaching goals. Also each year, you know, you do get, hopefully you get additional funds from the legislature, and there will be decisions on, you know, what do you do with those funds? So as the business administrator, you know, I can do the calculations, okay, we're going to get this much money, and be a guide to say, all right, we want to do these different programs with it. How much will that cost, and how much do we have left? So, you know, I see the business administrator as truly a resource of information on what funds are available to help address where we see these gaps in equity.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Alan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate the time that you've taken in engaging with the board and the school district on this process. I also want to thank all of our representatives from our associations and our employee groups, and hope you have a lovely evening and weekend, and we'll certainly be in touch next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk a little bit about myself and answer some of your questions, and hopefully things went well.
Everybody can take a chance to say goodbye to Alan. Thank you for being
Take
with
care,
us.
Alan.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Alan.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm going to click out now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Okay, our next interview is Zane Wolstenhume, which is actually scheduled to start at 7:45. So I'm going to propose that we turn our cameras and our microphones off and take a quick break and reconvene in about 10 minutes. We'll see you soon. to take a break until 7:45. So we are jumping back on in just a minute, ready to start our next interview, 7:45. We're slowly coming back. Thanks all. Hey, do we have everybody here? Give me a thumbs up. I guess I can't see everybody. Got some looking for a few more. Okay. I don't see board member Namelka or Hanson, but they may just not have their video on. So as we get started, we've got our second finalist for our Salt Lake City School District Business Administrator, Zane Wolstenhume. Welcome to Zane.
Thank you very much.
I would like to just take a minute, Zane, and introduce you to 5 of our 6 association representatives who are here tonight. We've got Eric Adams, who represents Buildings and Grounds.
Eric.
Hello.
B. Alonzo, who represents Child Nutrition.
Hello.
And Deborah Candler, who's representing SLASA, our Administrators Association.
Deborah.
And Cindy Mills, representing SLEOPA.
Hello.
Hi, Cindy.
Ben Rowley's not with us. He's in Zions National Park. And he represents transportation. And James Tobler, representing our Teachers Education Association.
Hello, Zane.
James.
So thank you for being here, Zane. We're going to follow the same format we have. We've got 9 questions, and you've got a copy of them. We're going to try and aim for 45 minutes at the most for the interview, so about 5 minutes a question.
Okay.
And we're excited to hear from you. And I would like to take a minute to introduce all of you and those watching on Facebook to Zane. Zane Wolstenhume. Over the last 32 years, Zane has served as the business administrator for 3 different Utah school districts: South Summit School District, Logan City School District, and Ogden School District, each a progressively larger district. Zane is a past president of the Utah Association of School Business Administrators. Zane holds a Bachelor of Arts in Accounting from the University of Utah. In his letter of introduction, some of these puppies are happy. In his letter of introduction and his application for this position, Zane stated, "Serving as a business administrator is especially rewarding and provides unique opportunities to work with the public and other parties of interest to develop cooperative solutions to mutual problems, all with the goal of providing the best educational opportunities to the students and to ensure our public's trust." In one of his letters of recommendation, Zane is described as unfailingly kind and patient. That's not always how I'm described, but well done, Zane. Then another letter of recommendation says that Zane is widely respected by colleagues, administrators, and his direct reports for his intellectual that is innovative, efficient, and effective. That's Zane Woolstenhume. We will, and I'm sure I may be pronouncing your name wrong. I'm sorry.
You actually did it perfectly.
Good for me. We'll start with question 1, which is from our child nutrition group. B.
What do you see as your greatest strength as a business administrator? And what do you see as your greatest needs for improvement?
Well, thanks, B, for that question. I would say, aside from the experience I bring to the table and my understanding of school finance, my greatest strength, I think, is that of being a strategic thinker and a good thought partner in trying to solve problems that we have. I believe I have a good ability to see the beginning from the end. And as we talk about options and strategies and ideas, I think I have a pretty good grasp on being able to tell how the dominoes are going to fall and where the pinch points might be and what might work, what might not work. And so I think that strategic thinking strategy is a strong point for me. Interestingly enough, and contrary to what Melissa just said, I see one of my greatest needs of improvement is to work on my patience. But sometimes I like to see things happen before their time, and sometimes it takes time. But I've found as I'm more patient, things happen better. So that's how I would respond to that question.
All right, thank you, Zane.
Hi, Zane. I've got your second question.
Thank you.
What role does the business administrator play in Salt Lake City School District, and how does this role support the development and implementation of district student achievement goals?
Thanks, Christy. So I see the role of the school business administrator as being twofold primarily, and everything else seems to fall under this umbrella for me. One has to do with being a good steward. The other has to be with being a good public servant. So stewardship and service. State code is fairly clear on the area specific to which the business administrator has stewardship. And it all boils down to district resources, financial resources, facilities, and also the minutes of the Board of Education. The service side of that, and it's the piece of this whole business that I really, really like, is the opportunity and the privilege that I see it as being to serve the students, the staff, the patrons, the taxpayers of the school district. And interestingly enough, what a lot of people don't think about when we talk about service, we also have a service to those who are investing in the school district. The district has debt outstanding, and we rely on bondholders to buy those bonds so we can borrow the money to do what we need to do. So we actually have a big constituency that we're there to serve. I see my role as a business administrator in helping achieve the district's goals is to be a good thought partner. I would like to think that I would be an asset that you would want at the table as you strategize and plan for the future. I'd like to think that I would have something to offer in that regard. So it's a comprehensive thing for me, and it's all about service and serving everyone in the district. So that's how I'd respond to that, Christy. Thank you.
Hi, Zane. Tell us about an experience you've had in managing budget cuts how did you develop recommendations for those cuts?
Thanks, Michelle. So fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, for the last 10 years, I've worked in school districts where we've had declining enrollment. And I think Salt Lake City School District is going through a little bit of that. And so every year, we have to be mindful of that fact. And because enrollment's declining, WPUs are down, and unless we get increases from the legislature into the value of the WPU, we find ourselves working with less money from year to year. And so we have to account for those things. A couple of the things that we've done and that we do basically in this environment is we have to know that with fewer kids, we need less staff. And through attrition, we've been able to manage that in the last 2 districts without having to do any RIFs or layoffs. But maybe, for instance, in Ogden, we're replacing almost 80 teachers every year. Maybe next year we only replace 75 to accommodate the decline in enrollment. But aside from that, I think we have to identify a couple of things. One, we need to identify and understand clearly, where are these cuts coming from? Are they to specific programs? Are they general across the board? My experience has been usually it's specific programs that need to be cut based on legislative decisions that we don't have a lot of control over. And then we need to identify what are the critical needs that we have and what are the critical positions that we have. What are those things that are essential to the mission and vision of the school district that we need to protect as we look at those cuts? And then the next thing I think, and it's in keeping as I understand it with Salt Lake City School District's philosophy of shared governance, you want to get people involved. The school board needs it involved. Usually the school board, and I think you guys have a budget committee. We need to sit down with them and understand exactly what's going on and in what parts of the budget it's going on. We need to bring to the table executive directors and department heads and talk about the issues at hand and collaboratively brainstorm solutions and options. If we work together to do those things, then it creates a better spirit of understanding. And the other thing that I found when we were going through this up in Logan in the last Great Recession was it was helpful to bring to the table association leaders because they have a vested interest in what's going on and these decisions that are being made. And they have great ideas. Sometimes not being in the trenches per se, we don't see everything that's going on and we don't see where the leaks are, so to speak. And having that perspective, I think, is helpful. Once we've got all the ideas in place and we understand what's going on, then I think based on what's critical, protecting those things that need to be protected, we prioritize our options and then strategically find a way to address the budget issues and budget concerns. It's important that that said, that we need to make sure that we're preserving the financial integrity of the school district. You can't continually spend down fund balance. I mentioned earlier our constituency with our investors. The district has a great bond rating. You would hate to jeopardize that by having your fund balance fall below a level where all of a sudden they start losing money. And so that's important to protect in this whole process as we set our priorities. So I think that generally sums it up.
Thank you, Zane. Our next question is question number 4. Will be asked by Deborah Candler.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. What methods do you use to ensure transparency in budget reports, specifically reporting financial information to principals, directors, the superintendent, the school board, and the community at large?
Thanks, Deborah. So I think there are some things that we need to understand with regards to transparency. The state kind of tells us in some respects what we need to present. So the state has a transparency website, and in fact, every transaction that the district has gets uploaded to that transparency website. And from that website, you could drill down to what did you buy with this little $50 purchase order, if that's what you have. And state code is very clear on what kind of reporting we need to do as business administrators to the school board every month. And so we have to meet those needs. But aside from that, I think people need what information they need. So one of the things that I try to do to ensure transparency is to make sure that everyone understands that my door is open and the books are open. And I'm more than happy to sit down with people, patrons, board members, employers or employees, excuse me, alike, anytime to talk about the school budget. And I really like the idea, and I've done this in the past. I try to make sure that the principals, for instance, and the executive directors know that that door's open. And I want to understand what it is they need to make the decisions that they need to make every day. So I don't think it's really helpful for me to hand you my annual financial report. It's wide open to the public and there's a whole lot of information in there, but it's not very useful to the normal Joe, so to speak. So I'd like to sit down with you as a principal and say, Deborah, how can I help you? What are your needs? And make sure that I'm getting you that information and doing it in a way that is helpful, that it's understandable. And if it's not those two things, then I'm not meeting your needs. And my goal, back to my whole service orientation, is to make sure I'm helping you do that. And whether it's you as a principal, whether it's an executive director over Title I, whether it's someone off the street to help them understand the district budget. To me, transparency is about not only information, but useful information and understandable information. And I pride myself, frankly, in being able to take what a lot of people see as kind of a complicated mess, i.e. school finance, and being able to explain that to people in an understandable way. I think one of the evidences of that is that I've been invited back on multiple occasions to do presentations to the School Boards Association, at school board conventions, on school finance. I've made presentations even just this last summer. Well, yeah, summer of 19. I was invited to make a presentation for the annual summer conference for the Utah School Employees Association. Maybe some of your folks were at that meeting, I don't know. Been invited back to do that again this summer. So that's how I would respond to that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Cindy. Cindy Mills has your next question.
What steps would you take to ensure equity among all employee groups in salaries and benefits as the salary budgets are prepared for contract negotiations?
Okay, that's That's a tough one. But let me tell you what I've done in the past and what seems to work, and talk about that a little bit. So, you know, the district spends about $155 million in salaries. That's how big that pie is. And if you throw in the 63 million in benefits that there is to deal with, it makes a pretty big pie. And in fact, it's like 90% almost of Salt Lake City School District's budget. And one of the things I've done, and that's helped me through our process, and it's part of the interest-based bargaining process. In my mind, that's open transparency, nothing hidden, but I take that pie, if you will, and I divide that up. So I would go into Salt Lake City School District, and how much are we spending on each piece of that pie? Each association being given their piece. And you know, frankly, you would expect the teachers have the biggest slice of that pie, and that's the way it is because there are more of those employees. And but in any case, we have that pie, and I see how that's broken up. And then I put together a spreadsheet, and I think, you know, I don't know why we couldn't do this in Salt Lake City School District. It's been really helpful. That shows that if we do a 1% COLA for each of these groups, how much is that going to cost? And if we give steps, assuming steps are available for all the employees, if we pay steps to everyone, what is the cost of those steps for each of those groups? And you can see by doing that how each slice of that pie is affected by that. Also in there, I include a section for health insurance. If we have a 5% increase in health insurance premiums, how's that going to affect each one of these groups? And each group is different. And some of the employee groups may have a larger proportion of employees who may not be eligible for, say, retirement or insurance benefits. But by doing that, and then I show that to everybody so everyone sees it as part of the IBB process, nothing's hid, then we can talk about that. So if I'm, you know, I say I'm from the standpoint of the district, okay, so if the district receives a bucket of money from the legislature, and we, in my mind, I'll always try to pull off a slice of that and be very transparent about it to deal with unforeseen expenditures that may come up. But here's what we have to work with, and everyone understands what we have to work with. And based on what we have to work with, what can we do with that money? Now, there are times, I believe, where we want to make sure that we're giving everyone their due, so to speak. And sometimes you have to do things, and it kind of lumps in, I think, to the next question, Melissa, but that's kind of how I would start that, and to make sure that everyone gets their piece of the pie.
Thank you.
Hello. Next question. Given the large percentage of the Salt Lake City school budget that is earmarked for wages and salaries, how would you work with the district's unions in the role of business administrator to ensure transparency in negotiations, that employees feel valued, and the district is able to recruit and retain the best employees possible?
Thanks for that question, James. So first of all, in my mind, it's a given that we want to retain the best employees possible and be able to recruit the best employees that we have. And we want to do everything we can to help employees feel valued. I don't have a lot of control over how people feel, and I understand that. But what I can do is control how I deal with people, and the whole business of interest-based bargaining is centered on trust. You need to be able to trust what I'm telling you is true. I need to be able to trust your motives and what it is you're asking to happen. And so if we've built that foundation of trust, which I believe the interest-based bargaining process does, and it reinforces that, there is nothing that I can bring to the table that you don't already know I have. So it doesn't do me any good as a business administrator to, I still have people believe that business administrators have somewhere in one of their drawers a wad of cash that we aren't telling anyone about. Okay. But I don't have that, and we don't have that, but so I don't play games with negotiations. I don't play games, cat and mouse games, if you will. I get out the sheet that the legislature gives me and the State Board of Education gives me, and it's the same sheet that you have, and we come down and we can mutually agree on what those numbers are right out of the chute. We can mutually agree on what needs to be protected. We can mutually agree on, how much of that money, if you will, needs to be earmarked for certain things. And once we've done that, I think we can do a lot to help meet the goals of the district in recruiting and retaining the best employees.
Thank you very much. And I believe Roberts does have that stash of cash in her desk somewhere.
Well, I can tell you a story. So I kid you not, when I was first hired as a BA back in 1988, they were at that time at South Summit had this habit of paying cash bonuses to the employees. I mean, they'd go to the bank and get a wad of $100 bills, and everybody loved it. Okay. And I had to put a stop to that, unfortunately, but I sat down with the guy I replaced, and he's a dear friend, now deceased, but he pulled the drawer open and he opened up a little box, and there was a wad of $100 bills in there. And he said, "Don't tell the auditor about this." So the first thing I did when I was hired is deposit that $100 wad of cash. So since then, I have never had the wad of cash in my drawer.
Thanks, Zane. Next question. Eric?
Hey, I was actually at that convention last summer, and I'm glad to hear you're coming back. Just a warning, this question was added at the last minute, and I did ask the last candidate this question.
That's
And the
right.
question is, schools are established for learning. Do you believe that the district employees should be able to continue learning and improving their skills, and how would you fund that?
So I'm a big advocate of professional development, from the Board of Education all the way down to the last employee. We're only as good as the tools in our belt. And I think we get those tools and we sharpen those tools through professional development. So in my mind, it needs to be one of those funding priorities that we budget for. I know in Ogden School District, for instance, we have earmarked a certain amount of money for the members of the education support professionals for professional development. It's an amount that we mutually agree upon, and we track that. If they don't spend it, we let it roll over, and that's kind of managed right now in Ogden through the HR department, and we could work that out. But I think it just needs to be a priority. I know it's a priority for teachers. They have budgets for that. I expect those things are probably pretty solidified in place. I'd be really surprised, let's say, if they're not. But if they're not, we need to make those things a priority. I think it should be a priority for the Board of Education to go to the USBA, to go to NSBA. I think it's important for me to be able to go to NSBA and to go to ASBO conferences and UASBO conferences, and and every employee association group has opportunities, and they should be given those opportunities. We just need to budget for them. One of the things that I was involved with recently, in fact, last winter before the COVID thing hit, was Ogden School District received a grant, I think, with the help of the USEA. And we went back to Washington, D.C. and spent some time with NEA developing a mentor program. And at that point, I committed. I was like the only business person there. But with our group, we made a commitment that we're going to support this mentor program and do it with the dollars that they need. And it didn't require a ton of money. I mean, very little really, to make sure that we had a mentor program in place to, as we onboarded classified employees, I still use that term, I'm sorry, to their positions to make sure they had a trainer and could learn their job and get the training they need. So it's very important and a priority for me.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Zane. I have your 8th question.
This one I've been waiting for.
All right. Well, here we go. Tell us of an experience when you have disagreed with a direction from a supervisor or governing body. How did you communicate your disagreement and what was the outcome?
Okay. So, Sam, I hope you'll beg my pardon, but because of the nature, the response to that question can get personal. I'd rather not get into specifics. I know I shared one with you guys at our last meeting, in a closed meeting. I felt like that was appropriate, but needless to say, if it's okay, I just want you to know that we will have disagreements. We will have disagreements between me and the board, probably individual members on the board, between me and the superintendent, between me and that's just the nature of the beast. We've got a lot of smart people who know what they're doing, and we're not always going to agree on things. And sometimes it might even get a little bit heated. That said, we can't let that get in the way and become an obstacle for us. And we have to recognize that at some point in time, somebody gets to make the decision, and everybody else needs to fall in line. So it's about, I've made a note about communication. It's really important that we be able to have an open dialogue. If Sam and I have a disagreement, Sam, you should be able to come in that open door and say, hey, I got a problem, and let's talk through this. And I am really a believer in the ability of two people, if they want to work things out, they can get things worked out so that it doesn't get in the way of taking care of business for the school district. I believe I've never had a disagreement or a situation in my career when we haven't been able to work through those challenges as they've come up, and I feel really good about that I have not left any bridges burnt. And in fact, when something got scorched, we've been able to make sure things were good going forward. So I would be happy to share more detailed information on a more private setting, but if that's okay, that's how I'd respond to that question. Thank you.
Thank you. That's just fine.
Hi, Zane. I think scorched but not burnt is a good goal. I have question 9. It is the last question. It is also a long question with 3 parts.
Okay.
And you heard it before. How do you define the difference between equality and equity? How can the Salt Lake City School District, through the business administrator, strategically allocate federal funding to qualifying schools to meet and support student needs necessary to close the achievement gap and racial disparities that exist within our district? If the board wanted to allocate resources to promote equity above equal distribution of resources, how might we sustainably move in that direction in the midst of a budget crisis? Thanks.
Thank you for that question. Interestingly, since we last met, I was going through my LinkedIn contacts and someone shared an equity thing that I wish I could share with you all tonight, but I'll do my best to describe it. When we talked before, I think I used the analogy of the racetrack. Everyone gets a ticket to the race, and equity is making sure everyone gets a box on which they can stand to see the race. But this one that I want to talk to you about, I've never seen anything quite like it, and the war is good. So it showed this tree, an apple tree, if you will, and it's full of fruit, but primarily the fruit's on one side and the tree is tilted kind of like this. And it showed a little picture of inequality where you had 2 little kids standing on the ground looking up at the tree, and they can't get at the fruit. It's just there, and they have no access to any opportunities to get the fruit. And then it showed another picture where each kid was given a ladder. We'll say it's 6 feet tall, and they both had the same tools, evenly distributed, if you will. And the one kid who was on the side where it was leaning was able to get up into the tree and get some apples off of the tree. The other student, we'll call him, is standing on the tree, standing on their ladder on the top rung, but they can't get at the fruit yet. That is what you would call equality. Everybody's got the same ladder, but they can't get at the fruit. The equity piece showed the one student with their 6-foot ladder getting their fruit, and then the other student was given a 9-foot ladder. And that got them up into the leaves, if you will, where they had access to the fruit too. The interesting thing about this picture that I'd never seen before is there was one more picture, and it was called justice. And under the justice scenario, tools had been put in place, pulleys had been put in place so that the tree went from being like this, more like this. And the kids were able to get access to the fruit all equally. So fixing the system, if you will. And that's the big challenge I think we have in education is how do we fix the system? Because it's geared for equality pretty much. Utah does a really good job, comparatively speaking, on the equity side of things, as far as the formulas that generate the money. The federal funding formulas are in place to help generate the money according to the needs. We need to make sure that we have systems in place to make sure that those dollars are given to the kids that are generating them, if you will. So as far as the role and what the business office can do, I think we need to take a careful look and analyze the systems that are in place to see that they are equitable in the way that we're describing. It may be, we talked a little bit about this last time, it may be that those Title I schools are getting all their Title I dollars. And that they're getting more, if you will, per student than a neighboring school of a similar size from the state and from what the district provides. But it may be also the case that that other school is able, through fundraising or whatever efforts, to generate dollars so that it becomes inequitable again. So those are hard systematic things that need to be addressed. But I'm confident that if the board is committed and if executive directors and principals are committed, we can find a way to work that out, and make sure that we have the systems in place to get the water where it needs to go, to the dry ground, if you will, so that all of those students have equal opportunity to get at the fruit, and that the district can get the outcomes that they're seeking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zane, thank you so much for joining us tonight and taking the time to work with this board on this process that you've been engaged in most recently. We look forward to reaching out to you next week, as well as the community. This will conclude our meeting for tonight, but I did want to give a huge shout out and thanks to all of our employee associations and representatives who are with us tonight and also taking the time. And of course, our community who's watching on Facebook Live. So I would give everybody a chance to thank Zane and to also thank Alan, and we will re-adjourn on Tuesday, June 9th for our school board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zane.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zane.
Thank you to you all for being here. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
For having us.
Take care.
Thank you.